Before priming the drop tank, I wanted to create some damage to the tank. Many of the pictures I saw online showed dents towards the front underside of drop tanks. An easy way to create dents in plastic is to use heat. You only need to heat the plastic for 3 seconds. Longer than that and you risk permanently melting the plastic. Here I heated the plastic and then pressed in using a round drill bit tool. This is a simple, easy way to create damage and make the drop tank more visually appealing. For priming, I am using good old Badger Stynylrez thinned with my mixed formula. Stynylrez is my absolute favorite acrylic primer. It just works. If you are curious to learn my mixed formula, it is located in my channel, and I have also posted it into my Facebook group, as well as numerous other Facebook modeling groups. To add some variation to the paintwork, I decided to do black basing for the drop tank. I'm using AK 3rd generation white, thinned with my mixed formula and airbrushed using my Renegade Jet airbrush. I recently picked up the Air and AFV set of AK 3rd gen paints, 240 paints in total. You will see me using them more and more in my future videos. Currently I can say they are far more resilient than my Vallejo Model Air. I also think the color match is more accurate than Vallejo or Ammo. I airbrushed the drop tank in AK Neutral Gray. I really like this color and to me it seems very accurate to the pictures I have seen. An interesting thing I noticed on the P40 drop tanks. They didn't seem to have any metallic chipping on them. I'm not sure why that is, I could have missed it, but I did look at dozens and dozens of pictures and no metallic chipping. Once I finished airbrushing the neutral gray, I applied a flat coat on top to prepare the paint for the weathering process. I used AK's new 3rd gen matte. It sprays really well and left a nice finish. However, it is definitely not a dead flat. Keep that in mind if you decide to use it. A flat coat has been applied and I have started with chipping and discoloration on the bottom. I used AK Interactive Weathering Pencil Dirty White. The Dirty White is a very nice complementary color to the neutral gray. I'm going to apply it using the wet method, and while it dries I'm going to blend it in using a dry brush. AK claims you can use the weathering pencils wet or dry, however I've never been able to get them to work via the dry method. Be careful when using the weathering pencils, as the effects will come off if you handle them too much. To add more variation and interest to the drop tank, I used AK Weathering Pencil Dirt on the bottom side of the tank. I went in heavy with the effect here as I figured the bottom side of the tank would have a lot of dust/mud from being on dirt and muddy fields. Again, I used the wet method of application. I know it looks exaggerated here, but when you apply a matte/flat coat on top to seal in the pencils, the effects will be reduced by 30%. I'm going to apply oil weathering on top and on the bottom of the drop tank. Pretty much every picture I found of drop tanks operating in combat had major oil discoloration. Oil lines leak, drop tanks leak, and in the combat arena, they weren't worried about being neat. You can replicate this effect by using a dark brown color straight from the tube. Add in a small amount bit by bit. Using a dry paintbrush, you can blend in the oil paint until you are happy. Oil paints are fantastic for this type of weathering effects, and I highly recommend you have some oil paints in your modeling arsenal. process for the bottom side of the tank is exactly the same as the top. Apply oil paints bit by bit, blend them in using a dry paintbrush. I decided I wanted to add in some oil streaks on the top of the drop tank. I freely admit I did not see any pictures of oil streaks on P40 drop tanks, but I would imagine over time this would occur. Oil streaks are fairly easy, just go gently with the flat face brush and sweep with the flow of gravity. Last bit of weathering for the drop tank, and that is mud splashes. I used a brush dipped into acrylic mud and flicked against a toothpick to create randomized splashes on the other side of the tank. I'm going to start by priming the bomb using Badger Stynylrez. Priming is very important for a couple of reasons. It helps locate flaws your eyes will never see on their own. It helps the paint adhere to the surface, and this is important if you're using an acrylic paint. It also helps makes the surface uniform. As you can see, I have found several flaws on this bomb that need to be fixed. I would have never found these flaws without applying the primer first. This is why I always recommend priming your model. After fixing the flaws, it is time to reprime the model. The thing I love about Badger Stynylrez is it feathers out really well when sanding, just like a lacquer primer. Feathering is really important for when you come back in to reprime everything. You want it to blend, and there should be no evidence of ever having sanded your primer to begin with. Once the flaws were fixed and the bomb was reprimed, I airbrushed AK 3rd Generation Yellow on top, so I could mask over the yellow identification strips instead of using the kit identification decals. The kit decals are really thick and would have a hard time conforming on top of a round surface. I'm using my Badger Renegade to airbrush the AK 3rd Gen Yellow, using my mixed formula of course. I was very impressed with the paint. It airbrushed very nicely, laid down smoothly, was rock hard in 5 minutes, and there was absolutely no tip drawing or clogging. I'm doing a full review of the AK 3rd Gen paint shortly, so stay tuned. The yellow identification stripes are masked, and now it is time to airbrush the bomb color. I'm using AK 3rd Generation Olive Drab mixed with my mixture formula and airbrushed using my Badger Renegade. Just like before, the paint is airbrushing beautifully. I decided to create chromatic variety to the olive drab by mixing in yellow to the remaining olive drab in my cup. I then airbrushed the mix in a mottling fashion over the olive drab, creating chromatic variety and at the same time giving the olive drab a more used appearance. From my research, I found that bombs were typically left out in the open exposed to the elements. The colors would fade, paint chipped, streaks appeared, and even in some cases light rust. Time to apply the gloss coat. I had ordered AK 3rd Gen Gloss so I could test it out on this video, but it did not arrive in time, so here I'm using good old Alcalad Aqua Gloss. The gloss coat is to protect against the wash and decal setting solutions. For the decals, I wanted to try the Ammo by Mig decal solutions. The decal is really thick, so I was curious to see how the Ammo decal solutions would work here. I like that they have long brushes and are numbered 1 and 2, making it easier to figure out which one to use in which order. I found them to be very good, and I do recommend them. Once the decal was applied, I moved on to the wash. Recently I've been having issues using enamel washes. I'm finding the enamel smell is starting to cause issues. Oil washes are much better, but they take way too long to dry. So here I'm using Ammo by Mig acrylic washes. I have personally never had good results with the acrylic washes. In particular, I'm talking about Vallejo washes. But the Ammo acrylic seems to be different. You don't need to work it immediately or risk permanent staining. Even after drying fully, the Ammo washes come off with just water. I'm going to pick up the entire set for my collection and do some more testing. One thing to know about acrylic washes, they are more subtle in comparison to enamel or oil washes. You might need to apply several coats to achieve your desired look. The flat coat, aka the matte coat, brings everything together. Here I'm using AK 3rd Generation Matte. It sprays nicely and leaves a nice finish. It will also provide the foundation to apply weathering pencils. So I screwed up a bit here. I was going to show chipping and streaking using weathering pencils, but I forgot to hit record. I replicated chipping and streaking using AK weathering pencil number 19, named Chipping. Here I'm using oil paint to create some dust and dried mud effects. Weathering is all about layers. Before I applied the oils, I airbrushed AK Ultra Matte. It leaves a gorgeous dead flat finish and is just fantastic stuff. I highly recommend grabbing a bottle.